It's 4 p.m. on the fourth day of the conference, and you're all here. In Amazon terms, we say you're already raising the bar on a key leadership principle, learn and be curious. So thank you. Thank you for being here. My name is Subhash Vanga. I lead the solutions architecture team for US commercial, also referred to as small and medium businesses. And I'm here to share the story of one of our dear customer and partner, Infinite Athlete, whose mission is to revolutionize and modernize the sports industry, an industry that's deeply rooted in tradition and typically slow to modernize. Infinite Athlete provides technology solutions to some of the most prominent sports figures around the world. If you follow the Premier League, they are a principal sponsor of the Chelsea football team. In the US, they are a key technology partner to the NFL player operations, football operations, and they also have an extensive partnership with the NFL Players Association to advance player performance, health, and overall wellness. And under the hood, they are an all AWS shop today. They were one of our first Bedrock users back when it was still in early beta. And they've built some amazing capabilities on top of that platform. I'm super excited to have Chris Brown, the CTO for Infinite Athlete, with us today to talk about their AI journey and what they're doing to revolutionize the sports industry. Chris?
Thanks, Subhash. So during this talk, I want to give you a little bit of background about Infinite Athlete and who we are and where we come from. I want to talk a little bit about Bedrock. I want to talk a bit about how we use Bedrock. And then most importantly, I want to give you all some ideas for how you can go and use Bedrock in your organization. So first, I want to go back and talk a little bit of history. So let's go back to the year 2018. There were two important things that happened this year that I want to talk about. So just prior, the landmark Attention Is All You Need paper had been published. And in 2018, several models using the transformer architecture pioneered by that paper were beginning to take off. And among them was GPT-1, which was released in June of 2018 and immediately became the state-of-the-art in AI language models. The other significant event that I want to talk about is the formation of the Alliance of American Football. Show of hands, has anyone here heard of the Alliance of American Football? Yeah, okay. So the Alliance of American Football was a national football league that was announced in March of 2018. It began play less than a year later in February of 2019, but unfortunately it was short-lived. In just 8 weeks into the season, it went under. It turns out one of the league's major investors was defrauding the league in a $700 million cryptocurrency money laundering scam. So that was quite a wild ride, but we came away with a lot of learnings. So while I was there, I had the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of being able to build a national sports league from the ground up and building the tech stack and getting to understand exactly what other leagues and other sports were doing to power their technology. And one of the things that I learned was their tech stacks were largely dependent on this right here, the yellow legal pad. And it didn't matter what sport or what league, this was a pretty common and critical component. So whenever a coach or league staff wanted to do any sort of new analysis, the answer was often to find an intern and give them one of these. So for example, Troy Vincent, head of football operations at the NFL, part of his job is to scour plays for various infractions and review them. And so for the longest time, he had a staff member just shadow him with a yellow legal pad. And he would jot down notes, and then Troy Vincent would go back and review them later. And here's what he had to say about this. just completely dinosaur. Those were the words he used. Just completely dinosaur, but that was the world that we all lived in just a few years ago. Now, some leagues are more modern than others, but historically, they've all been a little bit behind the curve when it comes to adopting modern solutions to problems. And so I want to talk a little bit about why that is. And to do that, I want to go back to that other event in 2018. So OpenAI was making massive leaps in the field of AI. And what do they attribute it to? So earlier in the year, I had the pleasure of attending a Q&A with Sam Altman, where he said this: "We knew that models could learn and that they got predictably better with scale. Our intuition was to push on that insight as hard as we could. Many people overthought this approach, where we just pushed hard." So in the early days, they found that by merely throwing more and more data and more resources at their models, it kept getting better and better. And these days, it's a pretty well-known fact that these models scale well with data. And in fact, many believe AI is facing a data bottleneck, which will prevent it from growing due to a lack of comprehensive, high-quality data sets. And at Infinite Athlete, we believe that the sports industry in particular is very impacted by a similar data bottleneck, and that the growth and adoption of AI within sports is limited by the pace at which we can organize and create these high-quality data sets. And part of the reason for this issue in sports is sports leagues have a tendency to take their infrastructure and slice it up and divvy out portions of it among dozens of different vendors, each with their own vertical. And so even if the data exists, gathering it from all of these disparate sources into a cohesive, high-quality data set is impractical, if not impossible, for most consumers of the data due to a multitude of technical and non-technical reasons. So that's where Infinite Athlete comes in. So we do the heavy lifting of bringing together all of the league or team's data and integrating with vendor hardware in the stadium or in their own cloud APIs to bring it into one place, and we synchronize it and reconcile it against each other to make one cohesive data set. And this gives users of our products access to massive troves of data that they can use to then power their own products or AI applications. So, for example, if you want to train a model that deals in multiple modalities, like, say, text and video, you would likely need a data set that includes video with text labels describing what is in the video and adding context to it. And so one of the things that we do is we provide a comprehensive look into everything that's happening at any given point of time. So if you want to create a product that requires this sort of high-quality context from multiple modalities, you can have that. You can get video and what's on the scoreboard and what is the official doing at the time, or any given point of data altogether. So we use this in conjunction with the NFL and the Player Association to use these data sets with our biomechanical engineers, cutting-edge AI models to perform research that helps them to maximize player health and safety and minimize risk. And so when we say we're changing the game, we don't mean that, that's not hyperbole, that's not a metaphor. This research is actually directly impacting the way that the game is played. And that staff member that was shadowing Troy Vincent, well, he's now free to do something else. And now we've gone from completely dinosaur to godsend, as Troy Vincent now puts it, because they're able to save hundreds of hours each week and do things that they were never able to do before. Now, one of the challenges that comes with building larger and larger data sets is making them efficiently navigable by humans. And when Amazon Bedrock was first announced, we knew right away it was going to be a good fit for this problem, and we would be able to use its capabilities to help bridge the gap between humans and the data that they're looking for. And so I'm going to hand it off to Subhash again to talk a little bit more about Bedrock and its capabilities.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone here that has not heard about Bedrock at the conference yet? I hope not, because we had so many exciting announcements. Amazon Bedrock is a fully managed service that gives you access to some of the most advanced foundational models coming from some of the top AI innovators in the industry. AI21, Anthropic, Meta, and now the Novo family of models from Amazon is all enabled through a single API call, allows you to build and scale generative AI applications in a secure and a responsible way. Bedrock allows you to customize these foundation models with your data using techniques like fine-tuning or RAG. It's integrated with every other service on the platform, which means that when you build a generative AI application, it's extremely easy to build that interoperability with your other application landscape that's running on the AWS platform. It also allows you to build agents, which can then perform complex workflows on your behalf with an API call, accessing your systems, your data sources on the back end. And finally, the important piece is the security aspect. Your data, your model, your customization is sitting in your VPC and is completely secured and is not used to train any of the models or does not make it outside of your VPC. Finally, Bedrock also comes with guardrails, which allows you to be responsible with the inferences. Eliminating biases, reducing hallucinations are part of what guardrails offers you on the platform. And for those of you who had a chance to follow some of the key announcements in the conference, an important capability called distillation or distilled models, which allows you to take the training and the customization of a large language model and transfer it to a smaller language model that is trained and does one or a small set of tasks much more accurately and a much lower cost. This gives you the flexibility now to leverage the training of a large model and then use a much smaller model with the same capability at a much lower cost. And there is automatic prompt routing, which is when you have a family of models, for example, Claude, or the Novo family from Amazon, Bedrock has the ability to automatically route that prompt to the best model based on your criteria. This allows you a lot of choice, a lot of flexibility, and allows you to take advantage of the best model, whether it's from an accuracy or a cost efficiency perspective, with one API call. So, we've heard the story about how Chris and his team leveraged Bedrock as the foundation to build this capability for the NFL. We're going to look at maybe a particular use case on how does that show up in terms of outcomes.
Yes.
Chris?
So let's get a little more practical, and we're going to look at one particular way that you can bridge that gap between users and their data. So let's say we want to allow a user to just ask a question, like say, show me touchdown passes by the GOAT. And we want them to just be able to get that information immediately. And we don't want them to have to hire an intern and grab a yellow legal pad. Well, here's one way that we can accomplish that. So we can take the user's input along with any relevant context about their affiliations or preferences or so on. And we can take that and we can pass it to Amazon Bedrock. And we can ask the Bedrock model to just say, give me a database query that would fulfill the user's request. And so if you're using SQL, this technique that I'm talking about is called text-to-SQL. But this works with any database. At Infinite Athlete, we use a domain-specific language, which looks like something like what you can see on the screen here. And once your model returns that, you can then take that query and you can execute it against your database or databases. So for Infinite Athlete, that's generally a combination of DynamoDB and OpenSearch. And then you get your results back, and you can surface that to the user. If you're familiar with RAG, this is kind of the opposite. With RAG, you go to the database first, you do a vector search, you get relevant results or results that you think might be relevant. Then you take all of that and you submit it to your model and you say, hey, fulfill the user's request using these results. Well, with this technique, we're doing the opposite. We're going to the model first, and then we're going to the database. And for some use cases, this has a few advantages. So, for example, this tends to work really well with complex criteria for which you want exact matches only. So if we say, give me plays in the afternoon from between the 35 and the 38-yard line. Like, we don't want anything on the 34-yard line. We don't want anything on the 40-yard line. We don't want the things that are close or maybe relevant. We want exact matches. And this is really good for that case. It also works really well for cases where instead of just trying to give the user an answer or just trying to extract a small bit of information from your data, you want to return to the user a potentially very large data set, which might not actually fit into your model's context window, or maybe your model just doesn't have the attention span for it. I want to point out a few other properties of this technique as well that are pretty nice. So the first one is only one model invocation is needed. So this makes the solution very fast, as there's no need to perform sequential model invocations. And you can certainly extend this and make this more powerful with an agentic solution. You could even combine it with RAG in some ways. In fact, Eric Peters, director at NFL Media, did an excellent talk on Monday, and actually another one earlier today, on how they use an agentic approach that does a similar thing for NFL Media. So I highly recommend that. You can find it on YouTube. But you can get a lot of leverage and a lot of mileage out of just one invocation. The second point I want to make here is the model never actually touches the data. So Bedrock provides excellent security controls. But if anyone in your organization is still a little bit antsy about exposing potentially sensitive data like PII to a large language model, with this kind of architecture, you can rest assured there's no contact at any point. All the model sees is your database schema, and it tells you what to execute. You go to your database, and that goes directly from your database to the user, or wherever you're processing the data. And then lastly, model output can be cached independently of the data. So if you have users repeating the same questions over and over again, you can make this solution even zippier and even cheaper by caching the model output with a very long TTL. And you can do that without compromising at all on the freshness of your data, because you can cache the model output, which is a query, and still execute the query on demand so that your data is always fresh when it's given to the user. So this kind of solution is a very good fit for a wide variety of use cases. We use it in sports, but it can be used in any field, and Bedrock makes it amazingly easy to implement. So I'm going to hand it back to Subhash to talk a little bit more about what the journey with Bedrock typically looks like.
Thanks, Chris. So we talked about the platform itself giving you a choice of the foundation models, giving you the ability to test and experiment quickly on finding that right model for your use case, being able to customize it with your own data sources for specifically addressing your business use cases. We also talked about the data privacy and security pieces where your data and your model and your customizations stay within your VPC. We talked about guardrails that allow you to be responsible with the inferences that are being generated and trying to minimize hallucinations. And finally, with agents, you can orchestrate complex workflows with simple API calls. And you can leverage a whole set of models to be able to orchestrate a complex workflow. But a key part of what makes a customer's Gen AI journey successful is identifying and fleshing out the business use case. And this is where we can help. Your solution architects, your TAMs, your CSMs, your account teams are all here to help you, one, identify the right use cases for your business, build the business justification, and be able to visualize what kind of improvement, what kind of outcomes that you're trying to drive. Be able to put together a reasonable cost structure so that it is a lot more predictable for you as your application starts to scale from an experiment to a pilot to production. What we're noticing is that this piece, the business use case piece, has a disproportionate amount of influence on the success of your journey with generative AI. And so make sure to go back and talk to your account teams about how we can help you traverse this journey. In addition to your account teams, we have several of our channel partners that have competency in this area, that have very structured programs for you to go through this journey, in addition to several funding mechanisms to help you experiment quickly. And so with that, I want to thank Chris for coming in and presenting to all of you about their journey on Bedrock and how they're able to deliver these powerful outcomes to transform an industry that's typically has been, slow to adopt modern technology. And with that, I want to hand it off to Chris to close.
Yes. So I think we have enough time for questions. If anyone has questions, there are mics in the aisle. Otherwise, for those that are going to drop off, please make sure to complete the session survey. Feel free to connect us on LinkedIn. But yeah, we'll open the floor if anyone has any questions, or we'll also hang around after the talk if anyone just wants to chat.